Okay, there is a note here written down. It says, the species surviving makes a world where reproduction is prioritized. If you don't want to reproduce, then you live uncomfortably. Um, so, okay, what this note was getting at, I think, is that the species surviving, um, so the mechanism by which that seems to have happened on the planet is that certain aspects of avoiding death get sort of promoted. They survive. But they survive because people, animals who have ways of avoiding death that are slightly slower, and so on, will sort of easily get crushed. Is that even true? I don't even know if that's true. But let's say that's true, right? You get crushed, as in you die. You die if you can't get to the food fast enough. So whoever gets to the food faster is the animal who survives. And so that species of animal survives. You could say also that group of animals, or that specific society of animals, right? All those animals interacting together. The culture of those animals, to say it one way, like the the way in which social life is harmonized or takes place. So it feels like non-death is prioritized. Non-death gets prioritized. Or let's say whoever prioritizes non-death has historically seems to have had a sort of higher survival rate, let's say. Right? It gets really muddled up, I think, the way we speak about this. But let's say that's what's happening. So then, at some point, like, right, reproduction comes into this. So it's not just who gets the food faster, who runs away the faster or hides more from predators, who kills predators more easily. But sort of how does reproduction happen? Does it happen very fast as well, in a way that therefore will not be interrupted? So the reproductive process won't be interrupted by predators. It won't be interrupted by other animals. It won't be interrupted by some circumstance in the environment or some lack of food. Right? So a bunch of things get covered, right? That then the picture we give ourselves. So I'm trying to understand, like, the picture we give ourselves of this process of the evolution of animals is that then, right, so within that space in which you're not getting killed, you're not starving, right, you're not burning or freezing and so on, once all those conditions are happening, then if like reproduction happens there in a way that's fast and doesn't sort of like doesn't get interfered by all these possible things, death of different kinds, then that society of animals survives, right? So it kind of creates this strange situation where the society that's created is a society that this society of beings are beings who like mate very like quickly, for example, or who for whom mating is an important thing. I guess then like that's why libido and ideas about that get applied to mating, to sexual reproduction. Libido gets placed there, so it's like we find it really important. And right, currently our whole sort of society is sort of built around giving a huge amount of importance to uh, sexual reproduction. Mm, so, what the I guess the idea that was on my note, I'm not sure what it was. I'm trying to sort of get it right here. Is that what that does? See, we speak of this. If you look on Wikipedia, the words that are used to talk about this is like the survival of the species. The species survives. But really, who survives exactly, and what do we mean by that? Because again, if surviving simply means surviving, then that's great, right? Some people are alive and others are not alive. Some animals are alive, others are not. But there is at this like out of all this group of people who are surviving, whoever values sexual reproduction more will sort of okay, it seems like the picture that we're painting leads us to say, right, suppose that whoever values sexual reproduction the most will find it easier to live in that society because that whole society is ordered around sexual reproduction being a huge value at the pinnacle of the pyramid, of the structure. So, if you value sexual reproduction, then somehow the whole world is sort of easy for you in some way. And if you value other things more, if your sort of array of desires and interests and libido are spread towards all sorts of other areas and diminish, the more that your interest in sexual reproduction diminishes, then that species, the survival of the species, means you aren't going to have such an easy time there, right? At least we're led to say that, I think. So really, who survives exactly? Who survives in this survival of the species? Again, because as I was sort of trying to say in the other video, it's like if we're using survival simply to mean but being alive or being dead in a binary sort of way, then I don't know. I mean, you can say that individuals are alive or dead. I don't think you can say a species is alive or dead because we don't relate to it in that way as something that's alive or dead. So yeah, you could say that all of the animals, all of the beings that are in that society are alive. But if we also mean survival as we usually mean it, like whenever we use these words, that's why it's confusing to me, because we also use words like adaptability and being adapted to the environment And it feels like we're sort of sometimes conflating, it seems to me, in Wikipedia articles or whatever, it feels like we talk about survival as if it is some sort of a good life, a good, harmonious, adapted, sort of nicely in sync kind of life, a life that is nicely in sync with the environment, nicely in sync with itself and with life, a life that's sort of rooted down, and then there are other kinds of life that are not as rooted and not as easy, and so it means that if what we mean by the species is the group, as in the society, then the society survives through this sort of process whereby sexual reproduction gets prioritized. So then, what survives is precisely a structure, or a societal structure, a way in which everything is being organized and carried out, in which things are not valued more than sex. And so what's being rooted down, whenever we use these words of things being adapted, it's not like, I would sort of question here, I would ask a question. I don't think it's actually the species that's rooted down and adapted. If we mean rooted down and adapted and surviving in this sort of more ethical way, in this moral way that represents the good life, then what gets rooted down and adapted, what adapts, is a specific part of the society, a specific group of the society who, or a specific way of being that that prioritizes sexual reproduction, precisely. And as a consequence, sort of all of I guess what ends up happening is that all the paraphernalia that goes along with it. So, as a society sort of develop, I guess, more of an issue of all of the things that we end up associating with sexual reproduction, like beliefs, right? Beliefs about the world, maybe body, like specific types of bodies that are considered okay, normative, specific ways of behaving, specific alternative desires that are not sex but which are considered to be okay because they foster sex, they go along with it, they help sex to be brought up, specific ways of dressing, ways of speaking, and so on. So a whole series of other things that seem to go along with this preservation and prioritization of sexual reproduction, right? So it is whoever in that society prioritizes those values or exhibits those behaviors, has those body types, and so on, will be nicely rooted in that society, right? The species surviving, the species being adapted to the environment, doesn't that just simply mean a specific way of being? Some of it ideal, some of it material, right? Things that can't just be completely changed at will, ways of being and acting, that certain ways of being and acting get nice and snugly sort of adapted, in the sense that they become sort of nice and comfortable in some way. The death becomes very far away from them, right? Very far away, because death gets really far away from sexual reproduction, right? It is made this way, so that any potential threats, any lack of food, any lack of sleep, any lack of shelter over your head gets very far away from the ways of being that are, and acting, that are like what this society sort of represents. And, right, a species is not just that. It's not just one way of being. It's a practically never-ending variety of different ways of being. So there are all sorts of different ways of being, different body types, different behaviors, different tones of voice and ideas and all that are, but therefore not going to be in that central space where death is averted. They're going to be living on the fringes of society where death is very existent and close at hand. So you could say, the society is surviving. You could say, I mean, if you say it's adapted to its environment, what does that mean? You know, because it seems to be escapable from this idea that a central core of the society is going to be close to the ways in which death is averted in that specific society, and then other parts of the society are going to be very close to ways in which death is close. It's interesting. It seems like almost as if capitalism, like what we call capitalism, is sort of inherent, or sort of has sort of evolved specifically, right, from the way in which stuff went on even in prehistoric times, even sort of the process of how everything has happened from the past onwards. And so, okay, so here's the thing. I don't think that's a good thing. So I'm really suspicious and dubious when we sort of celebrate these things, like survival. Survival of the species. Survival of the species makes it seem as if everyone in that society, everyone in that species has survived. It's a nice big party where everyone's sort of having fun and being alive. But it seems to be inevitable that it survives at the cost of there being a central node of material power, right? Because it survives, it seems to survive in this way in which traits that are, again, closer to death get averted. But it's a group of people, of animals, where you sort of don't get to choose how you are, right? Maybe you're gonna be, you're gonna have those traits that are closer to death, and maybe you don't have them. You know, so it does depend on this idea of like a centralizing node of like there's a sort of this sort of cloak of power or something resting in the center. And the way I've always sort of read about biology in class or in popularized talk about it in media, I always get the sense that it's sort of, this just gets celebrated. It gets celebrated in the sense of like how great that things survive, you know, how fascinating, and by extension, how good are the things that survive. The things that survive are really good. They're great. They're really, how adapted to the environment. All the things that didn't survive, no, they're not great. But like, what about, for example, an animal, a person who doesn't prioritize getting quick to the food and escaping from death and so on. An animal who doesn't prioritize that, who might prioritize sort of just living together with other people, isn't like, I mean, yeah, it's all kind of cliched questions, I guess, but when we say adapted to the environment, really, that something's better adapted, look, it's been a constant process of things becoming more and more and better adapted to the environment. Really? Does becoming like a creature that just kills everything in its path become better adapted to its environment? Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be better adapted to your environment if it depends on sort of systemically getting rid of any ways of being and acting that are not entirely sort of ego-centered, right? Yeah. So I don't know. It's not much to say. I don't really have that. I don't have much to say about it now. I do feel a bit angry about it, though. I feel angry when we sort of prioritize these things, or like speak of these processes. Like, I'm aware that when people are doing real science, this sort of way in which things slowly get moralized doesn't happen, hopefully, you know. But the terms we use slowly get sort of, they drift off into like morality land when we start talking about this as if it's adapted to the environment in the sense that it's like better than other things, which we don't know. We don't know whether the things that didn't survive weren't better. We don't know, and we can't. We never will, because they're not here, right? Because we can't know. We're like, it's like saying that, trying to describe things that aren't here, you know. No, it doesn't happen. Yeah. I don't know really what I want to say about this, to be honest. I don't really know what I want to say about it. Other than this, yeah, this just sense that all these words related to evolution, I just see them used so much as meaning good, good stuff, good stuff. What survives is good. Really, things can survive really well, you know what I mean? Like, toxic relationships can survive. They can really last like 20 years. They can survive. And beautiful little friendships can last like a week. You meet someone at a festival, it's a beautiful little friendship, and that's it. And you know, relationships with your teachers, you see them just during the course, and maybe it's a great relationship, but it doesn't survive longer than the 20-year toxic crap, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, things like toxic relationships develop incredible mechanisms to avoid that system from breaking down. They develop incredible, ingenious little tools to like stave off death, stave off the death of that little nodule. But obviously that's not good. It just isn't good. There is no inherent like goodness to that, to just pure survival of structure. All sorts of structures can survive. We've all been trapped in situations we didn't like and that they lasted really long. And we've been in situations that we really enjoyed that luckily did sort of last long or whatever. I mean, and vice versa, and all sorts of combinations of what good and right is and so on. And of course that's all entering into this realm of describing what it supposedly animals wanted too, which is funny, like animals who are not us, which is another level of abstraction of saying like, yeah, clearly, obviously, these animals wanted or prioritized or enjoyed having this nice, comfortable existence. Really? What if like, well, what does that, first of all, how are we even talking about what other people want? People and animals that we have no way of having like an interactive relationship with, in which we can use language to communicate. But then furthermore, why this prioritization of comfort? You know, you get the food fast, you get it easy, everything's easy, it's warm and snuggly, and then there's all these other animals that died in the cold and they couldn't get the food, and yeah, they that was no good adaptation. But this nice, comfortable, snuggly thing, really, there are all sorts of ways in which challenge and sort of living life as it's sort of as it appears. Like we can see human cases or our own sort of subjective situations in which there's a fine distinction, I think, between like saying, obviously, anyone who wants food and shelter and comfort and warmth, anyone who wants that could have it. Like in the sense that I think it would be good if they could have it. If anyone who wanted that could have it, I think that'd be a good thing. But that's not the same as saying that these values are somehow eternal and objective. There are moments when, there are clear moments when straying from that is desired. I don't know. It creates a strange sort of worldview where life is good, sort of inherently good, and death is somehow metaphysically a bad thing, sort of thing. Like just the kind of in itself, death in itself is bad somehow, you know? And I find it funny how sometimes we talk about these things in terms of biology, as if science could say anything about that, as if our biology is sort of, our biology is in our science of biology, our disciplines. Sometimes, again, I think more at the popular level, more at the entertainment biology level, and not so much probably at the actual science level, but how we speak of this stuff as if these issues of the morality of death and so on were inherently like just a part of the fabric of reality, that obviously we don't want death and obviously we want life. Really? What does that mean? Like, the fact that things survived and that therefore by surviving they were continuing to be alive doesn't mean anything more than that. It's a purely, like, talking about it in those terms, Darwinian theory is hopefully, I think, in order to be a scientific, has to be purely descriptive. But it's so easy and tempting for us to include some little element of morality in there. Like, well, surely it must be good. Surely it must be good to, like, survive and be alive. It must be good in a way that's sort of good, and that then death is not. I don't know. I think those are complicated questions that are sort of beyond biology, definitely, and enter more into the realm of philosophy, psychology, and and stuff like that. So